and welcome to another episode of the Best You interview series. It's Gary here again. Thank you very much, as always, for taking the time to join me today. And today I'm joined by entrepreneur and founder of identity and access management company TechJutsu, Tracey Nyholt, who is here to discuss how to find your advantage in business and in life. TechJutsu is at the forefront of identity and access management, professional services and products who are dedicated to partnering with forward-thinking organizations that understand and embrace the importance of security. And who doesn't like to feel more secure in life? Tracey has performed numerous technical roles in her career, mostly in male-dominated environments, which became an opportunity for her to create her own IT security company. Tracey's journey has not all been smooth sailing, yet it has helped her absorb and utilize lessons from all colleagues to create her own advantage in the industry and in her company specifically. Recently, Tracey was featured in Security Brief Canada's article on Canadian women in cyber making waves coast to coast, furthering her and others' stellar work in highlighting the significant contribution of women in the tech industry. Tracey also volunteers with the Women in Communication and Technology Alberta chapter here, based predominantly in Calgary, which was actually the first time we met. It was quite some time ago. We were on a panel at the same time, and we had an opportunity to meet in person at an event not so long ago as well. So I was absolutely delighted when Tracey agreed to come on to the podcast. And Tracey is a trooper in every single sense of the word, because she has a bit of a head cold today and agreed nonetheless to say, let's get this done, because this is real life and these are how things happen. Tracey, thank you very, very much for taking the time to join me today.
Thank you for having me, Gary, and I always appreciate your contributions to women in communication technology. It's great to have an ally like
It's absolutely 100% my pleasure, and it gets the opportunity to get the brilliant word out and get an opportunity to meet fantastic people like yourself as well. So when we had a chance to pre-record, I always like to meet the guests back before it to basically understand what the flow of the conversation will look like. It was a really fascinating journey that you had, and of course, I don't know everything about everything, but you know the opportunity to really grow up through an industry that, as I mentioned earlier, and I don't like the term male dominated, but I just haven't come up with something else that would say that very thing, without fluffing the words or anything like that. But the journey that you had wasn't, as I mentioned in the bio there, always smooth sailing. There were certain things that had happened to you, but it gave you the inspiration to say, I think I'm going to do my own thing, and I think this is what it's going to look like from the get-go, and take it from there. So could you tell us a bit about your journey, how it all came to be to the point of today?
Yeah, so I'm an unlikely person to end up in cybersecurity. I had a degree in English literature, and I'm more of a creative thinker.
Yeah.
But I also saw that to really do well economically, you needed to be in a male-dominated field, which I describe, I think, more as maybe a male culture field.
Right.
Where the culture in IT is very male because that's typically who's in IT. So I did, teach myself IT and take some additional courses and landed myself an entry-level help desk position, worked my way up primarily by offering to document other people's roles for them and let them pass it off as their own work. And then, just kept learning and learning and, eventually got to a point where I was an identity architect. And after a few years of doing that, I got bored and thought, I'll start a business. How hard could it be? Not very hard. I was a bit naive going into that.
I think you have to be in some level, because I think if you truly know what it means to establish, manage, and maintain, sustain, hopefully grow a business, it would probably put almost every single person off of doing it.
I would not have done it if I knew how hard it was going to be. In my mind, I was going to be a millionaire in 2 years and I'd be on a beach drinking Mai Tais.
Yeah.
10 years later, I'm still working hard.
Yeah, so it's been 10 years of TechJutsu.
Yeah, it's our anniversary at the end of September.
Oh, wow, incredible. Absolutely. Wow, that's it. Congratulations. You know what? 10 years of any business in any industry is so impressive. I was talking to someone just last week, and it was a volunteer organisation that has been going for 40 years in Rangersland, Glasgow Rangers being my team of choice from back home. And for any organisation to survive for any level of decades, whether it would be 1, 2, 3, or 4, as it was in this case, it's just a testimony to the grit and endeavour and passion and perseverance of the people involved. When you say you wouldn't have started it based on how hard it's been, explain that a bit more.
Yeah, I don't mean to sound like I regret it. I don't, but I really thought I was training for a sprint, and this is a marathon.
Right.
In a marathon, there are times when you're like, I just can't go on. This is just too hard, and then you have to find it in yourself to keep going. And
Yeah.
it's been really challenging.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand that, especially when you get to an opportunity where you do have customers who are relying on you, you do have team members who are relying on you, and you have you relying on you to give yourself that opportunity. So, like working in a male cultured environment, I do love that terminology, and maybe I'll start to adopt that with your permission going forward. It's a great terminology. How did that how did that inspire you to get to a spot where you said, I think I can, one, do this, two, do it better than other people are doing it right now, and three, take the experiences that I've had that weren't always positive. You mentioned doing a lot of things and other people taking credit for your work there. How did using all of that inspire you to say, now is the time, I believe it's me, and I'm going to go for this?
I think early in my career, I learned a lot from men. So men, have this great sort of showing care by acts of service and helping, and I learned a lot of that. And I also learned, men often need to establish a hierarchy, and I think a lot of women struggle with dealing with that. So if a man talks over them in a meeting, they'll shut down. Whereas I would like, oh, that's how the game works. Okay, I'll just talk over you right back. You're going to shake my hand too hard. I'll dig my fingernail into your hand when you're doing that.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot of male behaviors, but that just gave me a bigger tool belt. So, now I can maybe pull out the velvet hammer that I naturally have, but I could also pull out the chainsaw that I learned to have working with men.
Yeah.
And so I just have a wider tool belt of things to pull from when problems arise. So I can decide, does this problem require a hammer or, a feather? And I can pull out both. So I think it's really given me a broad range of behaviors and tools to solve problems.
Yeah, I love the analogies that you're using, the velvet hammer or the feather or such. Do you know the thing that really strikes me based on what you said there, Tracy, is your ability to not only just live the experience and have the experience in and of the experience, but then to be curious about it. I know that's my word, not your word. You didn't say that, but to be curious about it and say, that's a kind of different thing. I didn't expect that. I wonder what I would do about that in the future. And you're accumulating the tool belt. I use that analogy when I'm teaching project management, is to say you've got tons of tools from a project manager perspective. You're not going to use every single one every single day. You just need to know when you would use the one that you need to use and what effect it's going to have when you actually use it. So I love that we're on the same page on that. And I think it seems to be the paying attention and the curiosity, right? That's how it works. That's what you're doing. Because a lot of this, I imagine, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is probably subconscious from most males, where that's just the way that they do it. That there isn't an intentional intimidation factor or in any way trying to create any sort of discomfort for anyone else.
No, I think always assuming most people do have good intentions, and they were maybe just raised around other men, and men tend to compete. It's just what
Hmm.
they do. So I learned to compete with them, and it's not a bad thing. It's been very useful for me in my career.
Yeah. Yeah. And when we chatted previously, you had mentioned that some of the inspiration came from watching kids, specifically young boys, and the way that they express themselves when they experience a success or anything like that. And it's resonated with me ever since. And there's, again, you observe things at a deeper level than others possibly do, but not so much just even the observation, taking that observation and saying, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it right now, but it doesn't seem like a throwaway. So I'm
Yeah.
going to just park it, and I'll recollect it at some point in the future. Please tell me the story again, because I loved it the first time I heard it.
Yeah. So I have two young nephews, and I was watching them. I can't remember if it was soccer or hockey, but every time they would score a goal, they would run around and dance and act like they'd just cured cancer. I was like, this is such an overreaction. But then I was also, to your word, curious about it. So I tried it. I sent an email that I didn't want to send. It was a challenging email. And then afterwards, I just celebrated myself and danced around my condo for 10 minutes. I felt
Yeah.
amazing. I was like, oh, actually, I think these little boys are onto something. And so
Yeah.
I started to copy it. And every time I would do something small, I would celebrate myself. And I noticed my confidence just went up exponentially. So I think there is a lot that we can learn, from men or from anyone who's not like us, if we just approach people with curiosity and be like, wonder why they do that and what the effect is, and try it on for size. And
Yeah.
not everything men do works for me. I don't do everything that men do, but some of the things really work for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's the ability to, again, I love what you said there in terms of you can learn from anyone about anything and starting to think, what are you doing? Why are you doing it that way? What do you hope to get from that? And just that observation. And because what it does is it helps you pay a different type and style of attention. I was asked recently, actually just yesterday, where where I come up with my social media topics. I do a social media video every weekday. And the question was, what AI system do you use? And I said, well, it's like a GI system, really, because it's Gary intelligence. Because I'll have a conversation, I'll see something, I'll see someone acting in a way, I'll see an interaction, I'll observe something, a movie, a podcast, something will inspire me, and I'll just literally text myself one or two words, and then that becomes one of the videos that goes out there. And it really, what it's taught me to do, this was not the intention in the beginning, but what it's taught me to do is to pay a different type of attention when I'm out and about, not to waste a moment. Now, I'm not saying if I go for a walk and I'm just looking to really flush some stuff out of my brain and give myself a breather, that I'm constantly going to be on the lookout for how squirrels are interacting or how the leaves are turning, brown for autumn or fall, or, any of that. It's appropriate to the time, but there's so much information out there all day, every day. And a lot of times it's literally just bouncing off of us and going away, and we'll never see it in that form again. And that's kind of too bad. So it sounds like you have that same or similar type of nature where there's always something to be gotten or gained from, observing at a deeper level.
Yeah, I love that. We did a fun one the other day where after the Coldplay Kiss Cam thing
Yeah.
came out, we decided to do basically a LinkedIn post of, a help desk analyst being, hugged by a hacker on a Kiss Cam, and people loved it. It was really funny because it was time
Yeah.
when I was
Yeah. And it
taking
make
up on life.
Yeah, exactly, and making it appropriate for that. I don't know if you've seen after the Kiss Cam, where very very quickly the company that the fellow worked for got Gwyneth Paltrow, his ex-wife, to come out and do that. I thought it was just absolute genius, because the ability to be able to make light of it. Obviously, there's some serious connotations below the surface of what seems to have happened with this couple, but notwithstanding that, the ability to be able to in some way benefit from that, and kind of get to the point where it becomes yesterday's news because it's a little bit fun, a little bit funny. They will manage their own life, and we'll just move on and say, "Oh, that was an experience," rather than we've all seen at certain times in the past where things can get very negative very quickly, very easily, and it becomes something that feels just a little bit icky and sticky and dirty to be done with. So I'm so glad I didn't actually see that, but I'm going to have to look for that after we finish recording for today, because I do love all the posts that you're putting out. One other thing that you mentioned to me, Tracey, when we chatted before, was that the creation of your company was, and this time it is your words, was the ultimate freedom. Tell me more about that.
I think it's a freedom to really be myself because I was in a male culture, and I became very male in some ways, but I also didn't fit in female culture anymore. You know, females are a bit more complex, I think, socially, and sometimes when I'm around a lot of women, I don't know what to say now.
Right.
I've gotten so used to male culture, and I think creating my own business just lets me be me.
Yeah.
So I set the tone, and obviously I have a team I'm responsible to, and customers I'm responsible to, but I do get to do things that are unique to me. So for example, we give everyone one day off paid to volunteer for a cause of their choice, because that's some of the change I want to be in the world.
Yeah.
And I think that's really exciting.
Yeah. And how intentional would you say you were in saying, I'm going to be the most genuine, authentic version of Tracey? How genuine, how intentional were you in the very beginning when you set off? Was that one of your key imperatives or foundational pillars of the organization, or was it something that you ended up happening to notice somewhat after the fact?
More something I noticed after the fact. I think I just didn't feel constrained anymore. And then I started to discover more who I am.
Yeah.
As much as we learn from other people, we're also always learning who we are and sometimes surprising ourselves.
Yeah.
I've surprised
Yeah.
myself a few times.
Yeah, I love that. What sort of impact has that had on your life with, say, for example, people who've been in your life for long time, family, friends, colleagues, and such? What sort of types and styles of things are they saying to you about you in terms of the growth that you've experienced in the past 10 years?
I think it's been largely around resilience. So I have a good friend that I talk through a lot of my business problems with, and there've been a number of times where I was like, I can't do this anymore, and somehow managed to pick myself back up, mostly because I had a team I was responsible for and
Yeah,
didn't want to let them down. But I've found a deeper resilience than I knew I had.
yeah. Deeper reserves of that resilience. And I guess you probably wouldn't even know how resilient you need to be because of you haven't had that experience yet.
Yeah.
And your journey and experience is going to be different to others. So it's actually a good segue into I'm genuinely curious about the journey. If you can recall back, 10 years is obviously a long time. And with memory, we remember what we think we remember, and we remember, parts of the feelings and emotions and the facts, quite frankly. But what would you say were the major challenges you faced in the early stages, and how's that kind of manifested itself into maybe some of the challenges you're facing today?
Yeah, I think in the early days I was overly optimistic, as you point out, you need to be. So, I was going to be a millionaire shortly. We were going to, probably Microsoft would buy us, who knows? But had these ideas of grandeur and not the ability yet to back that up. So I started joining accelerators and really just learning. But the more I learned and the more we came across businesses death by a thousand paper cuts. It's you've got a great product and great people. Oh, but you need to do this compliance thing and this legal thing, and oh, your accounting's not quite right, and oh, you need to spend some money on legal, and it's just a drain on your resources and on your
Yeah,
time, and sometimes on your excitement. And
yeah,
so you do have to kind of refine that excitement again. One thing we've done that has been helpful is we do these quarterly strategic meetings where the whole team gets together and maps out where we want to go. And it's not just always where we want the product to go, but sometimes it's what do we want to design for ourselves as a work life.
right,
So, one thing our team really wants to do is eventually get to a 4-day work week. And
right,
I'm like, okay, I'll support that, but we need to be able to fund that. So how do we do that? And then we
yeah,
start working backwards, and it got people excited again.
yeah,
They're focused.
yeah. And the opportunity, as you say, not to be so focused on the product per se, which is of course very important to the foundation of the organization, but how and who are we in and around this product, and what type of style of experience do we want to have? So in terms of the accelerators you mentioned there, and I'm really glad that we got an opportunity to speak about this as well, that how important has that been for your own personal journey, and which would then of course influence the professional journey that you're having? Because what I found when I'm involved in some of these organizations, or these communities, is probably a better word to use, is that I started to realize, like, I already knew anyway, but I had evidence to say you're not unique. You're going through the exact same thought patterns as everyone else. Your journey will kind of probably look like this. And, you might have a series of successes and then a couple of failures, and it will be confusing and it will be disappointing and it will be, it will be in some way impactful in a negative way, things like that. Is that the same type of style of experience that you were expecting and had? And then how's that manifested itself to what you're doing today?
Yeah, there's been a lot of just peer support. So we're all going through the same things.
Yeah.
And it's interesting now. I just finished an 18-month accelerator at Platform Calgary, but I've gone back to do a few steering committee things with them, and seeing the newer business coming in, I'm like, oh, I remember thinking that, like, almost like,
Yeah.
oh, isn't that cute? I remember thinking that it'd be so easy, and seeing where businesses are where I was 18 months ago is kind of makes me realize how much we've grown.
Yeah.
As
Because
well as businesses ahead of us and where we can go.
yeah, exactly that. So the appreciation that it literally is a journey. And, sometimes, we do have KPIs and measures of success and other indicators that will say, are we on track to where we plan to be? And I imagine that would be maybe part of some of, if not all of your quarterly, get togethers with the team. But then just that opportunity to observe, just to stop for a second, observe someone else doing something else at the same time. And does that give you an opportunity to lend your expertise to these folks as well through the program?
Yeah, there's a program now at Platform Calgary. It's a peer group. So essentially, we all bring our toughest problem of the week and we all solve it together. And that's been really helpful.
Oh, I love that. That opportunity to speak with like-minded people and get yourself, just someone. I'm part of an accountability group, and we're not in the same industry, not even close actually. And it's just a kind of a bunch of people randomly selected from a mastermind, Tony Robbins and Dean Graziosi, which I'm still quite involved with. And the literally, honestly, Tracy, be like one word that someone would say when I'm recounting, this is what I achieved this week. This, I didn't quite get to where I wanted with this, but this is the reason why. This is what I'm going to do about it next week. And someone would say, like, I can't even remember a word right now, but a word that would just be like opening a door, where I'm thinking, why did I not think of that? Like, I'm thinking all day, every day about this little business that I'm trying to make a success, and I can't get that. Why would I? It's a complete no-brainer. But maybe back in the day, I would spend some time actually ruminating, not positively, about that. But now I'm thinking, magic. That's exactly why we're here. This is exactly why it's worth an investment every single Friday morning at 10 a.m. my time to do this for an hour, because you get those nuggets that you would have eventually got it probably. But accelerator is in the word. You get that opportunity for just an observation or a piece of guidance or advice, or even someone giving advice or guidance to someone else, and you're kind of thinking, that was actually next week's problem, and I've solved it today. Now I'm on a roll. Do you have a similar experience?
Yeah, I think having people who aren't emotionally involved in your problem looking at it, you get
Yeah,
really great advice. And similarly, even though I'm struggling with my own problems, when I look at someone else, I'm like, oh, well, clearly you just need to do A, B, and C and your problem's solved. And so we're really able to help each other because we, all have that detached observation about each other's
yeah,
problems.
yeah, and even literally acknowledging the fact that you have emotional detachment from that helps you, and because then your peer group knows and understands that you're coming at this from an angle of, I know what you've told me, and I know a little bit about you and your product or service, and I know kind of how that happened to me, maybe not the exact same circumstance, but know that this is coming from a semi uneducated way as well. So you don't have to get emotionally invested in your reaction to that
Yeah.
either.
Yeah,
Yeah,
people can take or leave the advice, but
exactly.
often
Yeah.
very.
Yeah, I love it. So in terms of team building, you're very active in the women in communication technology space, and see a lot of posts in and around that, getting national recognition for the work that you're doing in your industry as well. How do you take that today? Based on all the experience that you've had, with the 10 years of being an entrepreneur and business owner, and the prior years of experience to that. How do you take that and help empower other people, specifically women that are looking to join the association, join the organization, join your company, or just generally be in a better position within industry?
Yeah, I think people understand best through stories. So just by sharing your stories and experiences, maybe someone hears my story or your story and they're like, oh, that might work for me. And they try it on for size and maybe it works for them and maybe it doesn't. But, I think that gives us, again, the more tools in our tool belts.
Yeah, yeah, creating that narrative that is actually genuinely going to resonate, which typically just involves, this was my truth. This was my experience. This is what happened. And then even just they're able to use nuggets from that. They don't have to, subscribe to the whole story per se. They can say, right, so let me just go back to that one point. You did feel insecure in the beginning. You did have moments you wanted to quit. You did have, a series of desperation points in your journey. Of course I did. You see, the quirky posts that come out, the really topical information that comes out, because you do really well in storytelling in terms of in and around your team online. I see it, and I love the content that you put out, as I mentioned earlier. Those are stories in and of themselves, and you get that opportunity to create a better connection and to say, it's not all, sweetness and light. I was actually talking to someone else recently about sports and elite athletes, and we see these elite athletes. If you think about general sports, what would be the longest one I watch? Probably like a really long tennis match would be something. So let's just say you see two guys going at it 5 hours on the tennis court, but you don't see any of the injuries or the jet lag or the train or the arguments with the coach or trying to fit in friends and family or trying to figure out who they are, because these are just young adults at this particular point. You just see this little tiny microcosm. So it's the same for us online, even if it's a short post or such. They get an opportunity to kind of look at us, but don't believe for a second this doesn't come with angst and pain and hardship and retakes and typos and flubs on words and everything else that comes with being a human being. And is that what you weave into your storytelling, warts and all sort of approach?
Yeah, I think people really seem to connect to the process more than the end product. Like,
Right.
yes, we're a successful company selling a product that people need, but the post I get the most reaction on is like, what was behind the scenes?
Yeah.
We're actually talking about doing a sort of behind the scenes of like, here's some of the business problems we have, and here's how we're solving them, just because people are genuinely interested in that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, the process and not the product, because attached to the process, attached to the product as well, but mostly attached to the process is the nuts and bolts, is the people, is the action and reaction, is the good days and bad days, is the choices that we're making, and some of the decisions that we could revisit at some point and say, not our best work, but we did what we could at the time, and and creating that reality almost. It's like a reality show that people can resonate with.
yeah, and even the story of the product, like our product came out of some work we were doing with a local credit union, implementing multi-factor authentication for their online banking and mobile banking. And they asked, well, what about our call center? Bad actors phone in there and they pretend to be Gary. They ask for a password reset and then they could go online and drain his account. What do we
Yeah.
do about that? We're like, I think we could solve that with the same multi-factor authentication. And that's how our Color Verify product was born.
Right.
People love to hear that story. It connects them with there's a why for this product. You didn't just make something. It
Yeah.
came from a real human need.
Yeah. A literal human need that's saving probably, I imagine, millions of dollars for unsuspecting, victims in the world.
Yeah, because most help desks use either security questions, which can be researched online. I'm sure your birthday's on some social media somewhere,
Probably, yeah.
or they use voice, which AI can mimic anyone's voice now. So there really is a need for stronger security.
Yeah. It's so funny you mentioned the voice part. I was actually just talking with my love Erin last night about the crank callers that come in. And if I don't, so for anyone out there, if I ever give you my number and you call me and I haven't put you in my contacts yet, I am not answering. I'm just not. And then, so please leave a voicemail and say, hi, it's Tracey. Just calling you as discussed. And I'll be like, oh, sorry, Tracey, I'll put you in my contacts right now. I don't answer anything from any number that I don't have. I have more than enough contacts in my book. But then obviously I'm in a similar boat. I'm trying to build a business and do the best I can, so that there's times when I'm kind of looking and going, it looks like a number that I might want to answer, but nope, I am not doing that. But the conversation we had last night was around the voice, and the fact that even if you did answer, probably the best thing to do is either to say a very quick or muffled hello or just wait on the other person speaking. and then see what happens from there. Because the AI tools are doing an absolutely incredible job now of mimicking almost everything that you could see online out there. So you don't really have your troubles to seek in terms of the ingenuity of the bad people out there. How do you constantly keep on top of that? Because it sounds like it's changing multiple times per day, not just per year or anything.
It is, but you take their ideas. So when bad actors started phoning people and pretending to be the tax authority or your bank, we started working on a product that's coming out soon called Org Verify. So you can verify the organization calling you is who they say they are.
Right.
So there'd be like a two-way code that would go back and forth, as
Yeah.
opposed to just caller ID, which can be spoofed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, the bad guys give us ideas.
Yeah, they do. So is the genuine value add then in the security game to say we appreciate that a lot of times we're going to be a little bit behind where you are, but our job is to close the gap. And it's not going to be, you're not going to have a free reign at this for 18 months anymore. We're just a few steps behind you. Is that the philosophy in the industry?
Bit of both. So there's definitely that reactive of, oh, a bad guy did this, let's fix it. But I think there's also the proactive of, okay, we put locks on the windows and the doors. Like, is there something else that's open?
Yeah.
And so proactively looking for how would I get in if I was, being malicious.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not 100%, I wasn't actually going to ask this question, but I'm really genuinely curious. In the security industry, how often would you actually hire a bad actor to say, and maybe I'm thinking of the movie, what was it, Catch Me If You Can, with Leonardo DiCaprio,
Yeah.
where eventually the FBI were like, stop stealing stuff from all the airplane companies and come and help us figure that out. Is that something that's fairly prevalent, or is that an industry secret possibly, where you would get people that are known to be doing that to say, come and work on the good side for a bit, give us some help and information, you'll be compensated for that?
That's a good question. I don't have a good answer to. We haven't done it personally because there'd be a lot of liability, I think, with that.
Mhm.
But you do certainly hire professional people called like pen testers who will, test your software and be essentially pretend to be bad guys and tell you
Yeah.
what the vulnerabilities are. One of our IT guys, also in a former life of his, did a lot of social engineering attacks. So he would go into companies, he would dress really nice. He'd be like, "Oh, can you hold the door for me?" And sure enough, people would let him in, and then he'd plug his laptop in and start stealing data, but then report back to the company of all these vulnerabilities.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's true. It's true in terms of the liability, because you could hire them under good faith, and they could come in under bad faith, and just wreak absolute havoc. And the penetration testing, I used to be involved in that a lot when I was doing IT projects and such. I fear now, as I say it out loud, that there's just this. You need to pay so much acute attention all
Yeah.
day, every day, to say they're not resting, therefore we can't rest. And how do you, as I say, bridge that gap? It's not I don't envy you in the industry that you've picked, Tracey.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of catch up, but I think we're creative enough that we can stay ahead on some things.
Yeah, yeah. Creativity, trying to counteract creativity. I love it. It's a bit of a game then.
Well, that's where I think the more feminine qualities come into is thinking more creatively. And a lot of the bad actors are men. So, you know,
Right.
one of my mentors was like, "I'm more worried about the women because they might approach things differently." And I'm like, "That's a good point." And
Yeah. Yeah, it is a really good point, actually. Yeah, it's certainly food for thought, maybe for part of a future conversation, if this is inspiring in any way. So, as you know, this is called the Best You podcast. And what I like to do is take an opportunity to ask each guest, what regular practice does Tracy employ to give her the best opportunity to be the best version of yourself each and every day?
I'm glad you brought up the curiosity because what I've been practicing when I do get emotional about something or I am frustrated with something is I try and step back and imagine someone has the best intentions
Yeah.
and try and be curious about how they're behaving and why. And often just try it on for size. I'll test it out just like you would a hat and be like, does this fit me? Nope. Maybe
Yeah.
this one does. And I think that's allowed me to really just learn a lot and grow.
Yeah, I love that. One of the key things I keep saying, my family and friend circle are probably fed up with it, but it's not about you, and people aren't thinking about you as much as you think that they are. So when someone does something, and I'll say in inverted commas, to you or at you or in some way impactful to you, our innate, fight or flight or freeze mentality would be to react in a certain type of way. So I love what you're saying is, you know, this is evoking some sort of reaction that I wasn't entirely anticipating or expecting or wanting. Why is that? And ultimately, it gets to a point where there's a level of, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but a level of ignorance on the other party's behalf, because they're kind of like, how would I know that that's a trigger for you? How would I know that you don't like that type of thing? How would I know that this is something that's a giant turnoff or anything like that? And then you're like, yeah, how would you know that? Because I think the lazy answer to that before would have been, well, you should have just bloody worked it out, or you know, if you had half a brain, anyone would know that. That doesn't help anyone move forward in anything.
Yeah, and I think, I totally lost my thought there. Sorry.
No, I was just saying, like people aren't thinking about you as much as you think they are. And once you get your your ego in check, and understand that, what else could possibly be happening? Not that everyone gets a pass, because people do behave badly, of course, but getting to that point where you kind of start to say, the only thing I can control is me, and I'm willing. So if these other people are not willing, or they're not doing the work, the inner work, that I'm doing, how would they be able to interact with me on a level plane that I would like them to interact with me on? It's just not going to work that way. So I love that you're actually doing that work and investing that time and energy into doing that.
Yeah, Tony Robbins always says you have the choice how you react.
Exactly. Exactly.
Trying to take on that responsibility. It's not
Yeah.
always comfortable.
It's not, and it doesn't always work, because but the key realization for me after the fact is that, talking about bridging the gaps or shortening the distance between bad behavior and the ability to be able to counteract that is what we're looking to do, certainly with my coaching work with clients, is the ability to say, I'm not trying to suppress any feelings or any actions or reactions, but what we're trying to do is really, really, accelerate the ones that serve you and minimize the ones that don't serve you, so that you still go through the feeling of angst or pain or guilt or disappointment or anger, but it's in a way that serves you, and it gets to that point where it's small enough to be useful and not large enough to be negatively impactful to the areas of your life. I read a quote in a book one day. It was actually a crime novel, where this detective in San Francisco, female detective, the guy says something very rude to her, but she's just arrested him or is about to arrest him or something like that, and she grabs him and shoves him against the wall. And then the inner voice, which is the words on the page, the inner voice says, react and you will learn nothing. So she lets him go, and then she sits him back down or whatever the interaction was. But that stuck with me. Honestly, that must be 20 years ago. I read that, maybe 15 if I was being on the generous side. But react and you'll learn nothing. So then if you just have that expansive thought to say, I could just, fight fire with fire right now, and then we'll see where we get. But it's probably it's probably where neither of us wanted to go anyway. So in a learning mindset, let me just ask another question. Let me just have you exhaust yourself first before I interrupt. Like whatever the appropriate reaction, of course, would be in and of the situation.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you for sharing.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome. So before I let you go, Tracey, this has been an absolutely fabulous conversation. I knew it was going to be. Where can people find out more about you, more about TechJutsu?
Yeah, you can reach out to us on our website at colorverify.com and come to any women in communication technology events.
Wonderful. This has been excellent. I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot more about you, about TechJutsu, about some of the challenges you're facing in the industry, and more importantly, the work that you're doing on and with yourself to be able to give yourself the best opportunity to be the best version of yourself. Tracey, thanks again for coming on the show. I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Gary.
My pleasure.